And every country that has tried the Chinese vaccine has sent it back because it doesn't work. What's going on in China right now, we don't know where this is going to go. But we have never seen a population so big and so unprepared subjected to something like this ever. All of the current strains that we have data on, which isn't all of them, I'll admit, show that the strains circulating in China are not a communicability that is in excess of measles. And 2 of the strains, the ones that we think are dominant, were only identified about 2.5, 3 months ago. And it usually takes about 6 months of data before you really get an idea about fatality and communicability. So we're not going to have that data for a while. In fact, it's going to be longer than it sounds like, because the Chinese have gone from collecting data and lying about it. So in all of December, 12 people in China died of COVID. Yeah, right. It's like the last day they collected data, only 6,000 people out of 1.5 billion caught the thing. Right. Anyway, they've gone from collecting data and lying about it to just not collecting data at all. Because what we're seeing is a breakdown of decision making. Remember, one-man government, dictatorship. All policies start and end with the chairman. And if there's no direct guidance from him, you either run on cult of personality decision making, you do what you think he wants, and that's how they start going out and disinfecting airport runways, or you do nothing. So we may never know how many people die here. The lowest realistic estimate I've seen is 1.5 million. But that assumes that the healthcare system doesn't break down. And we know that their fever clinics, which are their traditional first line of defense, have mostly closed because they can't find staff that don't have COVID. We don't know. And it's not going to stay limited to health. Here in the United States, we've got a diversified democratic system. We've got local government and state government and federal government. We have academia and business and civic organizations. And if one stumbles, the whole system doesn't fall apart because the others are still there, giving legitimacy and decision-making power overall. And so if some idiot glues their hand to a painting, or a bunch of housewives when curlers start screaming, "Let's go Brandon," at a food mall, our civilization doesn't end. But everything in China is one guy. And within 4 days of those protests over Thanksgiving, people weren't just protesting COVID lockdowns, they were protesting Xi's personal skill set. We've had a crack, and we don't know where that's going to go. But it's rarely good. And then let's talk about tech a little bit. There's this weird belief in the United States in particular that China and the United States are technological peers. And no. We make the high end. China makes the low end. But it's not as good as it sounds, because they can't make the high end, they can't make the mid quality, they can make the low quality, but they can only make the low quality with imported equipment, imported tools, imported software, and imported labor to do the quality checks. Well, back in December, the Biden administration put in a series of executive orders that said you can no longer buy the equipment or the tools or the software, and any American working in that sector now has to choose between their job and their citizenship. That was the bulk of the workers. Within 24 hours, every American in the sector was either transferred abroad or quit. It's over. It's already over. And anything that comes from semiconductors is over as well. That's AI, that's hypersonics, that's the Great Firewall, that's automation. It's all already over. China can assemble, and that's not nothing, that's huge. But a technological peer, it is not. They have spent the last 25 years, over $2 trillion US, and a bottomless amount of intellectual property theft to try to move beyond where they are right now. And they can't, because that takes a degree of cross-brain work that they don't train for, that you can't just teach, it's part of your culture. All right, let's talk finance. This is net worth in the United States by age bracket, 10-year age bracket. Now, as you get older, you get better at your job, you get raises, you start businesses, maybe you run a farm, you just get richer. But the real magic happens at age 50, because that's when your single largest expense, your last kid, leaves home and is someone else's problem. A lot of people just turned 50, huh? All right. And then with that extra money, you pay down your second biggest expense, which is typically your mortgage. And by 55, on average, that's paid down to zero. So that last decade, 55 to 64, the last decade that you're working is the wealthiest you will ever be. And the capital that you generate in that decade of your life is what drives the entire global system. It is literally where the money is. That is 70% of global private capital. Now you turn 65 and that changes. If there's a currency crash or a market crash, you won't have the income to recover. So you have to liquidate your holdings and go from, say, stocks and bonds to T-bills and cash. Perfectly normal. Everybody does it. And normally it doesn't matter because normally we have a demographic structure that looks like this. This is a standard pyramid. Children on the bottom, young adults, mature adults, retirees at the top, men on one side, women on the other. This is Nigeria, nearly pre-industrial. And normally, when you turn 65 in a system like this, it doesn't matter because there's more people 64 below and 63 below that. And the proportion has more or less held in this shape for the entirety of human history until 1945. Because that's when the Americans changed the way the world worked. At the end of the war, we found ourselves facing down Stalin and the Red Army. We're like, oh, we're gonna need some help with this one. And so we did the most reliable thing we could to build up an alliance. We bought it. We created globalization. We used our Navy to patrol the global ocean so that anyone could go anywhere at any time and interface in any market with any partner. And that changed the way national economics worked. Pre-1945, if you had food, oil, coal, and iron ore, you could industrialize and develop and expand. But if you lacked any of those, you were probably a colony. 1945 and globalization changed that. Now anyone could go and trade for anything, so you only needed one of the four. You could trade for the others. So at different paces, from different starting points, we all started down the path towards industrialization. And when you industrialize, family economics changes because you move off of the farm and into the city to take the industrial jobs. On the farm, kids are free labor. You have as many as you can, because free is great. But in an urban condo, kids are really expensive, really loud, really annoying, really dirty habits. And adults aren't dumb, so we had fewer of them. And 70 years on, we changed from this to this. Suddenly it matters if you turn 65. The baby boomers are the largest generation we've ever had. They're retiring. In fact, in the fourth quarter of last year, we hit the midpoint. Half of them have already retired. And they've liquidated their stocks and their bonds, and they've gone into T-bills and cash, and the velocity of money has already gone into screeching reverse. We've known that this has been coming since the last baby boomer was born in 1966.